Ladies and gentlemen, thanking all for coming. We are very happy and proud that we have here today American and Chinese filmmaker and ecologist John Liu. Yay! It appears that most of you know him already, maybe even very well. I think it started in the Netherlands. His coming to get to know him via a documentary series, Tegenlicht. There was this one episode called Green Gold. And I remember watching it, and I remember feeling very positive and hopeful afterwards. So I think his message, maybe also, the message of hope is one we really need today. So let's discuss this message. We have a lecture first of John Liu of about half an hour. And afterwards, we've invited two scientists from the Radboud University to get into a discussion with him, although during dinner we already decided that maybe we don't really disagree. And maybe that's a good thing. We'll see. And also there's plenty of time for you to enter into debate, ask questions with both John Liu and the other two speakers, who are Annelies van Uden. She's an economist. She researches the influence on innovation in developing countries. And Leon Lamers, he's a professor of aquatic ecology and environmental biology at the Radboud University. So that later. First, again, a warm hand for John Liu.
Well, I know what you're thinking. Another stand-up Chinese comic. No. I'm just giving Franz a few seconds to make a technical switch. But we're done, and we're moving. So I can't see it here, though. Does that work? Okay. Well, thank you. That's me. And I really am very thankful that you've come. And I'm very thankful for all the different people who have assisted me in the path that I've taken in the last few years. And I'm thankful to Common Land, who has helped me and it supports me, and many different organizations have helped me to continue this. So it's kind of strange, some of them. But high up in the Himalayas, this is high in the Himalayas in Xinjiang province, there's a river that was once known as the Mother River. And it was known as the Mother River because all the different tribes of the region grew up there. And one tribe was extremely successful. And this particular tribe had really good food. And I think it was their restaurants that they sent out all over the place. That was their method. This is the Han Chinese. That was sort of a joke, but well. This area is known as the Löss-plateau. And in 1995, I was asked by the World Bank to go there and to film a baseline study for the Löss-plateau Watershed Rehabilitation Project. This is Löss. It's a wind-borne sedimentary soil. It's created by the movements of glaciers and deposited on the plateau below by wind. It's very powdery and it's also very minerally rich, but it requires organic material to be fertile. And it's interesting because if you dig around in this stuff, you might find some interesting things, possibly. Let's see if he does. Okay. So this is the birthplace of the Chinese race. This was the place where the Han, the Qin, the Tang dynasties was located. This is to the southwest in Sichuan province. And it's a fully functional forested system. And if you go to the northeast, you find the Mongolian steppe. And it's a fully functional grassland system. These are gazelle that go across this huge, huge steppe. So there's a lot of evidence that Chinese began in a place which is very close to the, looks like the Rift Valley. It's a mixed forest and grassland ecosystem. And there's evidence of humans and their ancestors for about 1.5 million years, and it's generally believed to be the second place on Earth where settled agriculture began. But they built this magnificent civilization. This is where much of the art and science of early days and comparable to any civilization. But somehow they sowed the seeds of their own destruction, and in 1995, when I went there, it was totally degraded. And so it was hard for me to believe that the largest ethnic group on the planet came from such a massively degraded place. And I wanted to know more about this. So this was a sort of 2-week assignment to film the baseline study, but it now has been over 20 years, and I still am fascinated, and I still study these same issues. And what I found was that if you see the landscape, there's no vegetation to speak of, and there are these huge gullies that incise everything. It looks like the sort of the beginning of the Grand Canyon everywhere. And this is a clue. It's a little bit like ecological forensics. You know, if you have huge gullies, it means there must be a lot of water. And of course you see these this is the end game when they start to use these types of free ranging of goats and sheep. But basically what they're doing is they have a cycle of poverty and ecological destruction. So the behaviors of the people, the agricultural systems that they're employing are destructive. And so the more they do, the worse the situation gets. And in analyzing it, it's possible to see that they cut the trees, they then did slope farming on the hillsides, and then they free-ranged goats and sheep until there was nothing left, no vegetation left. And this is a place of extreme, in 1995 when I went there, it's a place of extreme poverty. One of the only places in China where people sometimes didn't marry because they couldn't afford to raise a family. And virtually they burned all the biomass. So there was no biomass, not much. I mean, they're accumulating the crop waste because they're going to burn that. So they're burning everything, and it was a sad story. But I found that this was not a scenario that was only happening in China. This was also happening in all the other cradles of civilization. So to study this is not to study only Chinese history, it's also to study the history of the planet. And what you find is that this is devastating not only to the socio-economic things, but to the basic fundamental ecological systems. So the water doesn't infiltrate and it flows away. And I started to realize I was studying dysfunctional systems. And the further I got into this, the more I saw, oh, many people are studying dysfunction. And we have a kind of fascination with dysfunction. It's like a deer caught in the headlights of a car. And this disruptions are related to other impacts. So you have localized impacts, but then you have downstream impacts, and you have global impacts. This is the effect of 1.6 billion tons of sediments going, and these are the dust storms, which are blowing up because the soil's exposed, and it just, that's Beijing, it blankets the cities. But it creates a particulate layer that goes all around the Earth. Now, in 1995, it looked like this. And in 2009, when we made Hope in a Changing Climate, it looked like this. So what we found was that it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems, including restoring ecological function that had been lost over long historical time. Well, that's exactly what we need now. And the function is one of the things that they did was that they differentiated ecological and economic land. And they did this by using biometric evaluations. They said, what is the value of the productivity that we're getting off these slope farming? And it was very little. And what's the value of the ecological function? And it's huge. So when they made these kind of determinations, they could release land to nature. And it would have increased value than continuing to try to extract things from this. Now, this is a very interesting phenomenon because it suggests that ecological function is more valuable than productivity. We need to think about this particular concept. And also the sediments came out of the river. In fact, the sediments, just sediment control alone, justified the entire investment. So essentially what I'm seeing are biotic and abiotic systems. Human systems, our governance, our economics, our telecommunications, our business systems, our social systems, they're abiotic. And the natural systems are biological systems. And they're different in time frame. And it made me kind of philosophical, and I wanted to know more about this, and I started thinking about time. And I realized that the Earth is 4.567 billion years old, and it was a molten rock surrounded by poisonous gases. And somehow it was transformed into a beautiful garden. And the process that did this is a biochemical photoreactive process that takes sunlight and water and minerals and creates animated life and respirates. And this is the process which created the atmosphere. And this constantly filtered and constantly renewed it. And it also created the hydrological cycle, and then it created the fertility in the soil, because each generation of life dies and lays down its body, and that leads to this accumulation of organic material. And what I found was that in modern thinking and in historical civilizations, we're not, and they weren't thinking about these things. They were thinking that the things which they extracted and manufactured and bought and sold were more valuable than the natural ecological systems. But this is simply untrue. And then I started to think about the cosmology that I grew up with, which is in the Judeo-Christian Islamic system. And it says that human beings emerged in paradise. And then I started to think about this from an evolutionary perspective, and I realized that human history is just the last moment in this evolutionary process. So actually, human beings, in evolutionary terms, emerge in paradise. But then the cosmology continues, and it says human beings sinned and were expelled from paradise. Well, what's that about? This is simply cheating. I'm showing you a cheetah nursing in the wild in the Masai Mara, so you will like me. But what is this about? Human beings sinned and are expelled from paradise. What happened? What exactly happened? And I don't quite understand the whole snake and the apple thing. I'm not quite clear on that. But from an evolutionary perspective, I think I know what original sin could be. It seems to me it's the reduction of biodiversity, which leads to the reduction in biomass, which leads to the reduction in the accumulation of organic material. Because this alters gas exchange through reduction of photosynthesis, so you sequester less carbon and you release less oxygen. And it changes the nutrient release by microbial communities and nutrient recycling because you have less accumulated organic matter. And it massively changes infiltration and retention of rainfall. And what you see in the Löss-plateau, what you see in the Mediterranean, the Middle East, the Sahel, Central Asia, all over the world. And this is Neolithic agriculture. And if I look at this, I know exactly what's wrong with this. We're exposing the soils to the wind and the sun and the rain. There's UV radiation, which is sterilizing the microbiologic communities. Everything about this is wrong. And if you look at industrial agriculture now, that's Neolithic agriculture on steroids with gigantic machines. And it leads to this. When you do that, you get 0% organic material in the soil. You've disrupted the hydrological cycle. There's no natural fertility. And you see indicators like sediment loads and then ephemeral streams. And so things which I didn't quite understand started to look more like I understood them. And I found that anywhere where you sort of broke immutable natural laws, that you said these evolutionary processes don't matter. We know better. We don't know better. These are laws, natural laws. And the cosmology says the wages of sin are death. So you really need to get this right. Now, we can't really go back into the past. We're going forward. And when I look at those pictures and I think about what people are doing, often this is coming from ignorance and it's coming from greed. And now I kind of wonder, well, what would happen if you acted from consciousness and generosity? What would be the outcome? Because we've seen that it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. And that this affects a whole range of issues. It looks to me like the problems that we're facing are symptoms. And if we take them separately and try to deal with them individually, that we are not going to succeed. We have to realize that they're the effects, they're the results of our behaviors. And they're all the same. It's all connected to the same thing. And it's also based on our behaviors, and it's connected to our economic thinking. And our economic thinking has said that wealth is coming from extraction, manufacturing, buying and selling things. Somehow the speculation between the cost and price of commodities and magically interest-bearing debt. Well, part of that is completely abstract and has no meaning whatsoever. And the other part of that is illogical because it values extraction, manufacturing, and buying and selling things higher than the source of life. In fact, it says the source of life is zero. And that the shiny objects that we produce and buy and sell are more valuable. Well, this is simply untrue. So we've based our security on something which is fundamentally untrue. And when I look at this, I find that there are these three trends: biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter. The entire Earth was colonized by biological life. Biodiversity is the infinite potential variety in genetics. And the accumulated organic material in natural systems is extraordinary. And this is the basis of the air we breathe. And this is the basis of the fertility in the soil. We have made a mistake. We've been thinking that wealth comes from scarcity, but wealth comes from abundance. And if we understand this and we align our behavior with this, it's possible to change it. I think we're at a turning point in human history, which is similar to the flat earth, round earth moment, or the end of slavery. There are laws and institutions. There's a corrupt and corrupting system which is in place, and it values things which are false, and things which are true have been devalued. And you can't do this. And all over the world, in different places, are beautiful systems. They're different systems. And we need to understand them. We need to value them. We need to look at the cultures that have always said living things are sacred. That the spread of mercantilism around the world was not progress, because it left vast areas of the planet degraded, and it impoverished now billions of people. And we have to realize that we can't go back, we can't change the history, but we have to tell the truth about the history, and we have to be reconciled with this. And we have to look further into our philosophy. What do we believe? Do we believe that people of one race are superior to another race? Or do we recognize the scientific fact that all human beings are related to each other? So, and biodiversity, biomass, accumulated organic material. We're not calculating these things. Our industrial areas are toxic, abiotic spaces, and we value them higher than natural systems. It's ridiculous. So I think we need to have a profound societal conversation. We need to realize that transformational change is not only possible, it's inevitable. We're not going to be able to continue. Hello? We have inverted the economy. We have inflated derivatives. And we've said that the source of life is zero. But it can't be true. It's not true. And so we're in this place where we're encouraging people to become corrupt. We're enriching people we know are criminals. And people who are doing the right thing are struggling to survive in the society. And it started to come to me that money is an abstraction. It's not based on anything. It can be beads or shells or rocks. But it's a trust mechanism. So we need to come together as a species. And we have to tell the truth. Our natural ecosystems must function for us to survive. And that all of us face the same future. And that we believe, we understand that if anybody or any living being is alive, that it's a representation of all life since the beginning of time. It can't be any other way. So all people, all living things, have equal rights. To say that I have a bigger gun, so I'm going to go to your country, and now your country is my country, is not a progressive or sophisticated philosophy. It's a barbaric one. And those cultures that lived for thousands of years protecting their ecosystems and understanding that they're sacred are higher levels of civilization. And we've set back human development by hundreds of years. And that biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter, those are the indicators and determinants of survival and sustainability for human beings. It's not like there's a whole bunch of different possibilities. And we're facing climate change. We're facing biodiversity loss. We have 7.5 billion people. We're adding 1 billion people every 12 years. The fastest way to reduce the population is to realize that we need lots of people to do ecosystem restoration and to give them vocational training to do this and add women's rights, access to contraception, and family planning. And the birth rates will go flat because they have anywhere in the world where they have access to women's rights, contraception, and family planning. So that's all I wanted to say. I hope I'm clear and you're still cheering. Or I can put back the cheetah. Thank you.